What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of A Thinking Man's Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Joseph PIRCHER, and with me, as always, my good friend Tommy STILES. And today we're joined by none other than IFBB Pro and Mr. USA, Stu Sutherland. Stu, how's it going, brother? Thanks for taking the time.
Howdy, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really excited to get into this because, we were just talking a little bit off air, and obviously we have plenty that we could fill this hour with. So, I know Tommy had put up a question box on Instagram, so why don't we start with something there, give somebody, a listener a chance to get a question in, and then we'll just let it flow.
Yeah, right before we dive into that, so Stu and I actually train at the same gym out in Arizona. So he's a West Coast guy. We stole him from the Pacific Northwest. He's definitely Arizona's now. So
Glad to be here.
yeah, desert dry. That's what we bring to the stage. So the biggest thing that I caught my eye when Stu moved here from Oregon was obviously his physique, but just how hard he trains. I mean, there's kind of a testament to the kind of muscle that a guy brings to the stage and based off how they train. So, I know you work with Blue Taylor and we'll get into that a little bit, but where did you, kind of pick up the training that you do? Does Blue do your training, or is it just you run your own training and he covers the prep and nutrition?
Yeah, he does. He does all the nutrition stuff for me. When I came to him and before I did my show in 21, when we started working together, he asked me like, how do you train? I was like, I really like doing this. My training style for context is, if you guys are familiar with like Jordan Peters, or I guess kind of Jansen's guys do it a bit too. But Jordan was like one of my I was a big fan of him for years. So pretty low volume, sets to failure. I'll sometimes do like rest pause stuff when I'm in the off season. I can recover from it and stuff like that. But just basically really hard straight sets and trying to get really strong at certain, movements. That has basically been my bread and butter for the last um, 4 or 5 years now. As long as I've really been serious into bodybuilding competitively, I haven't really changed my training all that much in that time frame. And it just, it's worked so far. Eventually, when I get older, I'm probably going to have to change things up just because, as you guys know, it takes a toll on you joint wise. And, you can't, no one squats 1,000 pounds, so you can't progressively overload forever. But, you know, don't fix it if it ain't broken. So far.
Right. And you've packed on a lot of muscle. You're what, 26, 27?
26. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've packed on a lot of muscle for where you're at age wise. So it definitely, the proof is in the pudding. We always say on this show, success leaves clues. It doesn't mean it's the only way to skin a cat, but when a lot of the biggest guys of all time for decades are doing a lot of the same brute basics, you're inside 5 weeks out or 4 weeks out from the New York Pro right now, and I just saw you deadlifting 585. So you're not changing too much of what
heavy.
you're doing in prep. Yeah. How do you go about adjusting your training in prep?
I really this last off season, it's basically the same split. When I start to get like kind of depleted and flattened out a bit, the numbers that you're moving kind of creep downwards. And for me, at least, if I get too weak in the gym, I just start withering away. I got a fast metabolism. I'm not really like a naturally big guy. I was like a 170 in high school, so it's been a long road to get here. But yeah, so I haven't really changed my split or even really my movement selection in prep. If I start to come down the hill too hard, I might decrease my volume a bit, because you just can't recover from the same amount when your food gets low. But I think the only real significant change I've made, like going from the off season to prep, was on that day, I deadlift on Wednesdays. I do my main leg day Sundays. And then on my deadlift day, it's like a thickness day. And then I'll also throw in some hamstring curls and leg extensions. And I noticed I don't know if it's because lighter body weight or the drugs are high or whatever, but in prep, like I can recover from that, and it tends to make my legs fuller. hitting them with a little touch-up work midweek, in addition to the main leg day. So, but otherwise, don't really change anything. Again, don't fix it if it ain't broken.
Right. So it's
Yes.
segueing from train. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so I mean, you're talking about all these movements and what you do as you kind of navigate a successful contest prep. But seeing the way that you've kind of gone about your bodybuilding seasons and the time that you've taken in between shows, I think you'd agree the best way to set up a good contest prep is a good off season. So, everyone pays attention, everyone gets excited, everyone gets a lot of engagement on the prep photos and seeing you now. But, we know that's kind of the end. You're getting near the end result. Like, that's not all the work that has gone into creating what we're about to see here in a couple of weeks at the New York Pro. So why don't you talk about it? I mean, I've seen that you got up you've said that you're 5'8", up to 300 pounds in the off season. I mean, I don't know that most people understand how fucking big that is and
It
how
was
much
uncomfortable.
yeah, and how much food that takes too. So, I mean, if we can just rewind back away from the prep stuff, just to give us an idea of what that off season is like for you.
Yeah. So I think my biggest jump was between the 21 Emerald Cup and the 22 USAs. I went from like 221 up to like 246 in about 15-month time span. So it was a really productive off season. Again, training was basically as I just described. I didn't really change that all that much, but um, I don't know. Maybe it's just like started taking more GH in that time frame when I started working with
Yeah.
Blue. But
Yeah.
I also, I was a year older and I was like 25, and I think your body kind of starts to hit a stride at a certain point. Your metabolism might slow down a little bit, and some of that weight that you're packing on tends to stick to you better. And I got up to like at the end of 21, I was about 283 at my heaviest. And then I started prep at like 275 or something, 273.
Okay.
And, as far as the offseason went, Blue is he's like really high protein, really high carb, pretty low fat, which works well with me.
Yeah.
And just kind of progress that food up just the way that you progress your weights or anything else, right?
Sure.
As long as your digestion can handle it. And that's why, I use a pretty low fat approach with the diet, because if you're pouring olive oil and avocados and shit on your off-season foods, for me at least, it just slows things down so much that for context, like I got up to like 1,100 1,200 grams of carbs in that off season, like solid food, which was just
Yeah. So solid food.
disgusting.
You're eating meat and rice 6 times a day?
Yeah, I think the biggest meal I had was like pre-workout. I think it was like 250 grams of raw weight rice. So that's like 200 grams of carbs. And my protein portions were like between 10 and 12 for like 5 meals a
Ooh,
day.
that's a fuck ton, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's no way around it at that point. Like you're just force feeding 24/7.
Yeah.
But, you're talking about setting yourself up for a good contest prep. Like we were saying earlier before you started recording, like, I spent 2/3 of this prep not hungry at all, just kind of like trimming things down, making
Right.
steady progress, staying strong in the gym. And it's just gotten hard in the last couple of weeks. Not terrible, but it just it makes it easier to, if you're eating a ton in the off season and you keep that metabolism really high. I also just have a fast metabolism, kind of lucky like that, but it makes prep a breeze, and you have so much more to cut away from. You end up not having to do as much cardio, and like you said, most of the work is done there. And I think a lot of people who do this sport kind of like casually or like recreationally, they're kind of like one foot in, one foot out. So like when contest prep starts, like they're excited to do a show, they're doing the cardio, they're training hard, they're taking the drugs, whatever. But like, the other half of the year, they might just be fucking off. They go to the gym, they eat clean or whatever, but they're not following the plan. They're not getting
Right.
all their shit in like they
Right.
really should be. And I knew personally, like I was never going to be a classic guy. I couldn't. So I got to be big. if I want to be an open pro. So, I mean, from 4 or 5 years ago when I really started to like, I knew that that was where I needed to be, right? So there was never any doubt in my mind. I knew I had to force feed myself, and I knew I had to, push my body weight up past where it was comfortable being, and
Yeah.
do that for enough years, and it put on a lot of tissue.
Yeah.
So
Now, can I ask, man? So those days, 1,100, 1,200 grams of carbs, is there a difference then where you bring it down on rest days or different types of training days, or is that 7 days a week nonstop 1,200 grams of carbs?
my training days my rest days were a little lower.
Yeah,
Um, I was training like 5 days a week.
sure.
But yeah, it's still a lot of food because you're recovering on your rest days, right? So you
Oh yeah,
feel that too. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's no way around at that point. Like you have a spoon in this hand and a water bottle in this
a
hand,
spoon,
and you're
Tommy,
just
a
you're
spoon.
just
Mr.
definitely a
USA
spoon.
uses a spoon.
The shovel, yeah. And he's just like one hand, the other hand.
Yeah,
That looks kind of gay, but
no, it's
yeah,
all right.
just on
It's
repeat.
only gay if you're gay, right? So,
Yeah, that's what I've heard. um, but yeah, it's really unpleasant for like 3/4 of the year.
yeah,
Um, but it's kind of what you got to do, especially if you're a skinnier kind of. I hate the word hard gainer because it's just a cop out.
yes.
I'm a hard gainer, but I force myself to
Yeah, you
eat.
force
So
past it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Tommy's probably sitting there feeling like he's like looking in a mirror right now in terms of the whole process and the mindset, because he's in a very similar boat where he has to crush food, and he's just now, I don't want to speak for you, Tommy, like you're not here, but it's been interesting to hear him, because Tommy and I talk every week. So it's like, I see how much he has to eat. And then even up until this point, he's not hungry in contest prep. So
Mhm.
then seeing that from you too, it's like Tommy said, success leaves clues. Like you guys are both big guys that shoved a ton of meat and rice, and then you were able to carry that into a prep. And we've talked about on this show the anabolic environment that food creates. So even as you're in a deficit, you're able to eat all that food, and yeah, you're getting leaner and your body weight might be coming down, but your training is excellent and your recovery is going to be excellent. So I don't know the exact sciences and ins and outs of when we're building muscle or when we're not, but I think there's something to be said for that first half of contest prep, especially in a situation like you guys when you're eating a ton. Man, your training is excellent, drugs are in, recovery's great. That's like some of the best training you're going to have all year. So
Definitely.
I
Yeah,
think,
that's
yeah,
probably.
also how much attention, I mean, I know you have a coach year round, but like I think a lot of people live with like this crippling fear of getting too fat. And I mean, I have a fast metabolism, you have a fast metabolism, but still like it's not something that I think about ever. Like I know that in the off season, I'm supposed to get as big as I can without becoming a tub of shit, basically. But if you're eating clean food 6 times a day all year round and you're having a few free meals here and there, it's impossible to get fat, especially with the right drugs in play, growth hormone. If you've been doing this a while and you train hard, I just don't see that being an environment that you're going to get fat. It's the people like Stu said that 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They kind of, they might have one good day of eating and then eat like a bird for 4 days, eat a cheat meal and act like they're eating big, and then repeat that saga for 6 months.
Yeah,
And then they start a prep and both feet go in and they're ready to hit the ground running. It's like you missed that whole environment where you would have put on new tissue. And now at
right.
most with drugs in play, you might recomp a couple pounds and look a little bit different on show day, but really you wasted the whole year.
yeah, yeah. I think you mentioned a couple things. You need to be training really hard. Nobody gets fat off the chicken and rice. I think Morgan Rice, he always says that nobody ever got fat off chicken and rice. He's right.
I believe it.
I think a meal or two off in the off season. Me personally, like my appetite's so bad, I don't want to go have cheat meals. I just want to force down my regular food because,
Yeah.
Right.
like, if I'm gonna have a meal, I want to enjoy it, and I'm like gonna have to force feed that too. So, I mean, but yeah, like, oftentimes they're not training hard, and that's the most important thing. Like, if you're eating a lot of food, like you need to be creating a demand for those calories. So if you're doing like sub maximal sets and you're not progressing your weights and getting stronger, like yeah, you are going to get fat because you're not really using those calories, especially if you're like sedentary. I'm very sedentary myself, but like it's going to go to your gut,
Yeah.
not your muscles.
Yeah, like
Sadly.
if your body weight is going up and your gym performance is not going up at a pretty similar rate comparatively, you're probably just getting fat. And
Yeah.
that's the nightmare scenario. But like you said, it all starts with the training. We've talked about that on there. That's where everything begins. And yeah, I have no doubt that you have good genetics, you have a good metabolism, whatever. But I've seen how you train, and you want to talk about creating a demand for food. Like I think that's where people need to begin when they're talking about, oh, I need to improve my metabolism, or even talking about getting leaner for lifestyle people. Train your ass off with the weights first and foremost.
Muscle burns fat. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
talking about my deadlift. Bring that up again. Like I do that session on Wednesdays. Thursdays are resting. My food's a little lower. Every single day, Friday, I wake up at like a new low. It's been like
Yeah,
clockwork, like the last 3 or 4 weeks in this prep because all day Thursday, I'm like trying to recover from that session.
resting.
It's like,
Yeah,
I deadlifted, I did a bunch of leg work, I did back work. I think it's a lot of stuff to recover from. And then I, wake up lighter and drier and leaner the next day.
yeah.
And, things move faster for like somebody like me or Tommy, like a bigger guy. You might fluctuate multiple pounds in a day or two.
Oh yeah.
But it's been really consistent. Like same kind of goes for leg days. Leg day Sunday, I got a rest day Monday. Tuesday, I'm probably gonna wake up later.
Hmm.
I'm expecting to tomorrow. So
What kind of are
I
you running, like the Jordan Peters, like push pull off, legs off and repeat, or
uh I'm doing push pull legs rest,
okay.
push pull rest. But that
I
second
got you.
pull day there, that's my deadlift day
That's
where
the
I do that
deadlift day.
touch up
Yeah.
work. Yeah. I think
Right on.
Jordan does have that in some of his splits. He calls it like a density day where
Yeah.
you do like, your hip hinge movement and some additional leg work and just kind of a smattering of shit, you
Yeah.
know. But they're really hard long days in the gym. Um, but
Yeah,
they
you
But
create
should
huge
again,
program.
recoveries.
those long sessions are creating that demand for the food again, though. That's like I hear what you're doing, and I'm like, man, you're just creating a huge demand for food. Tell me, what were you gonna say?
Jordan used to program for Dusty and I, and he put that density day, and it was 3.5 hours of training, like actual
Jesus
training.
Christ.
It was an entire Sunday was just booked for that.
Fuck.
Now you had mentioned, so I do want to ask about like the relationship with Blue, not to whatever extent you're comfortable, but I'll be honest, the first thing that I always thought of, at least early on when I would hear Blue, was like, oh man, he's just going to push tons of gear on people. And then as I've gotten, and that's just real. That's just honestly what I would associate him with, especially a few years back. Now, having talked to like guys that are advanced that work with him, like yourself, Trey is another guy. There's a couple of guys that I know that have worked with him. It really comes down to, and I don't want to speak for him or whatever the case is, but just a common theme we're seeing, and that one that Tommy and I have been trying to lean into ourselves. It's a fuck ton of food. And then also it comes down to, he seems to be another one of these guys that it's like, hey, with growth hormone, it's as much as you can afford. So,
Yeah,
I'd
pretty
like to
much.
I'd like to just hear your perspective on working with him. And again, like to whatever extent you're comfortable with, but just any themes or trends that you've picked up on working with him compared to the industry.
Yeah, so I had one previous coach prior to Blue. He's a local level guy, good dude. He knew what he was doing, just wasn't like a high level coach.
Sure.
But so Blues, I've been with him for over 2 years now. You say, yeah, I mean, I've heard that as well. Like he must push a lot of drugs on people, right? Because he's got some freaky looking guys. And I kind
Yeah.
of figured, okay, I'm gonna let this guy do what he wants with me. I want to get
Yeah.
big.
And he's
But he
creative
didn't.
freaks. Sorry to cut you off, but I have a
Yeah,
ton of respect for him. He was a guy that really caught my eye. There was a handful of them. Because, and he says it all the time, it's good marketing, but like something about look at the resume. Like
Check the
how
resume.
how can you ask someone to get you really big? How can you ask someone to get you really big if they've never done it with anybody before or themselves? And that's something Tommy and I have talked about. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry to cut you off there, but it's a good point.
Yeah. So like when I started working with him, I think at the end of 2020, I think my highest my drugs had gone was like 2 grams, maybe a little over 2 grams total. And it didn't increase really at all over the course of that prep. What he did have me start doing was, like you said, like he's big on growth hormone in prep and off season whenever you can afford it. Because if you're looking at like how these drugs affect your health negatively, your cholesterol, your liver, blood pressure, all that stuff. Like if you have a choice between running, 10 units of growth instead of 5 versus like 3 grams of drugs versus 2, like choose the growth hormone all day, because it's not going to annihilate your cholesterol. You have to be careful about like, blood sugars,
blood pressure.
Yeah. Sure. And I take blood pressure medication. It's just kind of required.
What do you take? Telmisartan?
I've used lisinopril in the past, but I recently started using telmisartan, like 40 mg a day. When my body weight comes down to like the 260s, 250s, I really don't need it anymore.
Sure.
But, I'm still taking it just because.
But I'll say that's smart, because it'll give him a more accurate look at what the physique really is, like in terms of holding any excess water,
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to switch over to it instead of the lisinopril, because it had that I forget all the mechanics of it, but
the
can help
system.
you hold well, high school bio. So where were we? Like he doesn't, every time he makes a drug change or he adds something in or changes something, he always asks me, are you comfortable with that? Like clockwork. So he's not aggressive with he's as aggressive as you're willing to be yourself, and he makes me I just got blood work done last week, like 4 weeks out. It's not great,
Sure.
but
I wouldn't expect it to be right now.
I showed that to him, and we keep tabs on stuff. And so overall, like from the time I started working with him to now, growth hormone's been high pretty much the whole time, except for when my blood sugars got high. We kind of dealt with that with a bit of Lantus in the off season, and what's that, metformin. Eventually, I think my food was just so damn high that my pancreas wasn't producing enough insulin. It wasn't really so much like a growth hormone induced hyperglycemia. Sure. It was more just like, your poor little pancreas is just taking a beating. So that's where like Lantus is helpful. And this past off season, we used that very effectively. I didn't have to drop my food down, didn't have to drop my growth down. Just supplemented my pancreas with, some additional insulin, did its job.
Can I ask how much?
I think I got up to like 30 units of Lantus in the morning.
That's cool.
I think I was doing like 8 units of Humalog pre-workout on like 3 days a week. So like, not huge numbers, but it was enough to get me, you're not really taking it for physique enhancement so much as like it's helping a little bit, but it's really just, helping you process the food you're eating.
What weight were you at those doses too? Just so people know.
285 to 295 range.
Right.
Exactly. And that's on a
5,000 grams of carbs. Like,
everyone listening to this, keep that in mind. Like, 30 might sound big, but factor in the size of the man using it too. You can get away with 10 if you're 60 pounds less than him, or even more.
Yeah. And, I wouldn't have used it if it weren't for, having some hyperglycemia. I was getting blood sugars up to like 105, 110 range. Started using that, dropped right back into like 90, 95. So problem solved, it's a no-brainer.
And it's that's another one too, that
it's prophylactic.
Right. It's a positive. Like, it's not like we're adding risk by taking this. And then especially with that, it's so slow. Some people just hear insulin. yeah, people hear insulin and they think like, or like, and I understand like maybe a client's first exposure to insulin or something, they're very, very nervous about it. And you have to explain to them, it's like, no, man, like you could try to kill yourself with this and it's not going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
People have, they
yeah,
failed.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, you just keep a Gatorade on, you're fine, you know?
right, right. Um, so then you kind of outlined like the big off season and then how
Mhm.
he's kind of worked through the prep. You had mentioned that he kind of pulled a lot of weight off you pretty quick though. Can you kind of talk us through the
Yeah.
context of that and like where within the prep that period laid? Like is he, trying to get out in front of it kind of at the early stages of prep and get you ahead of schedule, or what was the thinking?
Yeah. So, I started prep at 14 weeks out this year. Last year, I started at 17 out. And last year, by the time I got to like 7 weeks out, I had like lines in my glutes. I was
Yeah,
pretty goddamn lean. So
yeah.
I got to this point where I was just like pretty much every week, like clockwork, I was doing like big sushi refeeds. Like I was just
Mhm.
playing this balancing game between like, I don't want to overdo it, but I have to like, get that last little bit off. But I was way ahead of schedule. So
Right.
keeping that in mind, we started prep a little close for the show this year because I knew I needed less time. I was in about maybe a little leaner this time, but
Mm.
first few weeks of prep, he ramps your food up and then he starts trimming things down. And then once the ball got rolling for me this year, it was like I was losing 4, 5, 6 pounds a week, like regularly for like, I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks. I got down from like 288 down to like what 265, pretty damn fast.
And is that
And
visual difference pretty drastic?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
you probably see it in my face.
yeah,
Yeah, it's that's the most satisfying part of prep, right? Because like you're seeing big changes on the scale, training's still going good, you're getting leaner, you're still full, and you still feel pretty good, and that's the fun part. We've got to gotten past that part now. I'm like 252, 253 now. That's the lowest I've been. I don't think I'll get too much lighter than this.
mm,
Maybe another. So like again, I'm just using last year for context. I got down to like 244 at the lowest, but I competed at like 247. And the
okay,
last 2 or 3 weeks of prep, I was fluctuating between like 252 and 247. Because you start adding certain drugs in. I love Superdrol and Halo right at
oh
the end,
shit,
right before like pre-workout. And I I hate it when people say they grow into shows, right? But I think I actually put on a little tissue like
mm,
in that last couple of weeks, as weird as that sounds. Because we kind of save the jet fuel, the drugs and stuff, the
yeah,
harsher drugs for like
yeah,
further towards the end, so that you're not all burnt out by the time you start ramping those doses up. And I, I mean, I just kept on getting a little harder each week. Weight wasn't moving all that much at that point, um, but kind of brought in the final look. And I think I'm probably going to have a similar kind of path this year. So we'll see where I end up. I was happy with my condition last year, but it wasn't like nasty condition. Like my stage photos look decent, but it was like good, not great. I'd like to be great because like you know, in New York, I'm going to be going up against fucking Carlos. He's a balloon animal. I think Tonio Burton's doing it now.
yeah, yeah,
These guys have just got muscle bellies for days, but they haven't always been in the best shape.
right,
So
yeah,
like, if I got anything I can do, it's got to be like structure and conditioning. I'll be bigger than both those guys, I think, like weight wise.
yeah,
Muscularity wise, though, like they're so dense and round and stuff, I can't really do that. But if I'm significantly harder than a guy like that, then I can maybe have a chance against them. I'm not saying I can beat them necessarily because they're crazy, but that's got to be my strategy,
yeah.
because I
Right.
don't have all those bells and whistles necessarily.
As far as so we talked about GH. one of the questions that I got today was if asking if your opinion has changed regarding generics versus farm GH, and also asking what Blue thinks.
Blue, I've asked Blue about this a ton. And he's like, he's coached guys at the Olympia who were on all generic GH and they look sick. Like he's got a lot of guys on farm grade, he's got a lot of guys on generics. I've never used pharmaceutical grade growth hormone in my life. And my face has changed a ton in the last couple of years. So I'm taking something, I think a lot of the people who kind of like foo-foo generics are kind of just snobs. Again, I don't have the comparison there experience-wise for myself to say one's so much better than the other, but I mean, it's been working so far for me. And I can't justify spending 4 or 5 times as much per IU on pharmaceutical stuff. A lot of pros, they get some of their drugs for free sometimes. People don't really talk about that. Sadly, I don't. But
you're not there yet. You're still mediocre from what your Instagram says.
I'm gonna keep my day job. But I mean, if you can afford it and money's no object, go buy your Serostims. But if you're struggling to make rent, you probably shouldn't be bodybuilding. Period. It's expensive. I mean, what are you guys' opinions on it?
I'm 50. Like, I'm not gonna say that I'm team either way. I've used both. I've used Serostims for 2 years straight. I've used generics. I think the quality of the generic matters because I've definitely used shitty generics. So you have to know the generic you're getting is at least testing out at a certain percentage of growth hormone. But,
which we can know now. We can know. It's not hard to get it tested.
Yourself and
in that case,
too many other guys I know that are just walking around at 280 plus, 290, 300, and they're lean and they look like they're on GH.
They look like they're on a fuck ton of GH and they're on generics
too. I know some European guys. Sid and I have talked at length about this too. So I don't think I can vehemently pick a side. And that's why I'm so, when a guy picks farm grade as like tried and true, nothing else, I'm like, well, is that your bias or are you selling it? Like, why are you still on that team?
Yeah, that might be it, actually.
Well, there is a bias. There is a bias because they want to believe that there's a huge difference because they are paying for a huge difference. That buyer's difference remorse, in cost, that difference in cost better be worth it. In my experience, I've done handsome doses of both, and I can honestly say, if you get good generics, there is no difference because I've been on 6 of farm. And then gotten good generics and gone to 8, and it looks like I'm on 8 compared to 6. So, and everyone has a different story about growth hormone. Everyone, this Serostim loads some guys, it makes them feel tighter and leaner for other guys. The pens do this on some guys, whatever. I think there is something to monitoring how you respond. Like you mentioned, Stu, I think as crazy as it sounds, like certain features are dead giveaways as to whether or not you're a responder and whether or not it's real. Another layer of all this that's always stuck with me is that I heard Dr. Scott do a podcast where he said that there are non-responders, and it just has freaked me the fuck out. I've heard that too. Yeah. So he mentioned the number one thing that he mentioned is your fingernails. If you are on growth hormone, I mean, if you've been on for a bit, it's tough to tell. But if they grow back seemingly quicker than when you're not on, or if you increase your dose or switch it, whatever the case is, he said that's a good one. And then like your physical structure as well. Like you mentioned, like bone and cheek structure, your hands growing, feet growing, stuff like that are like physical signs that it could be real and that you're responding. I don't know where I'm going with all this, to be honest, but I don't know. I think if you find good stuff, it's worth it. It's worth it.
I think I've heard Scott talk about that before, where like your IGF just doesn't go up when you take growth hormone.
Yeah.
which would
Crazy.
just be a nightmare, wouldn't it?
Oh my
Like,
God, dude.
um, but now that you mention it, like I actually do have to clip my nails quite frequently.
Yep.
So I hope that's
Yeah,
a good
like way
sign.
more, like almost every time I look down and I'm like, oh, I need to clip these again. Like I'm surprised at how quickly I need to do them again. Um,
Yeah.
I noticed the
so
shoes.
yeah,
I've probably added a full shoe size in the last few years too. Like I was
Really?
always a 12 and now it's like a 13.
mine has just gotten wider. I wear the same
Yeah.
length shoe and I just need wider shoes. Like the same,
I,
like I have Jordans from 2008 that the length is still the same and I can barely struggle to jam my foot into it.
That's kind of the
I
growth
think,
hormone foot too, because like I've seen some bodybuilders. I'm not going to name any names, but their feet start to look like almost
Yeah.
oh yeah,
prehistoric,
just
like
Yes.
they look like elephant
flippers.
feet. They're just totally
Yes.
flat.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a part of that's just your arches cave when your body weight gets super high and you're
Yep.
walking around at like 300 pounds all the time. But yeah, I haven't personally, like my feet haven't grown. They haven't gotten longer. They've probably gotten a little more swollen, maybe a little wider. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My hands are pretty thick, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Something's working. So
For sure.
I was going to say, yeah, if you can put pictures next, like left to right, and see composition changes and get all the positive effects of growth or what it's supposed to do, then keep running with it. I don't think you have to, like you said, if money's no object, go the farm route if you can. But it's that debate's just as old as like free weights versus machines now.
I think it would be silly though, because in that debate, then I think we would all think it was silly if somebody said to us, absolutely never use free weights or absolutely never use machines. It's like,
Right.
well, it depends. Like, I don't know. I've gotten a lot of good information from certain coaches that that's one thing that they just absolutely refute. And I get the sentiment, like as a black and white statement, if you want your clients to absolutely make sure they have the right thing. Sure. Yeah. It's a nice luxury to say all your clients are on farm growth, but man, especially, I don't know, like Tommy and I, a lot of the guys that we're helping are still pretty early in their journey. And it's like, even to get them on 4 units of generics, it's like they're like splitting hairs to do it. So
yeah, and you got to remember that like you'll notice it, like immediate cosmetic changes when you start using growth hormone versus before you start using it. But it takes years of being on pretty significant dosages before you really start to see the muscle growth benefits of
yes,
it.
Yeah.
You can see
yes,
fat loss quickly, you can see fullness quickly, but
yes,
you got to remember, and I'm sure you guys know this, like the thing that's happening there is hyperplasia. And when you
yes,
have those new muscle cells, they're brand new, you haven't trained them before, they're tiny. And then they multiply, they grow over the course of years, and it increases like the total amount of muscle that you could potentially have down the line versus if you hadn't had growth hormone in the mix. But you got to build those new cells and then you got to grow them. And that takes, a long time.
yes.
And you got to be in it for the long haul. Taking a little bit of GH at a moderate dose for a couple of months is like, why bother?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, when you make that commitment to go on, you should, unless you hit a financial crisis where you got to choose between having a home and growth hormone, pick the home, but you really
Still a hard
shouldn't
choice.
ever come off, man. Like,
Right. Yeah, like it just stays in all year, and it depends on, I guess depending on your health and where you are, it can go up or down. But if you really want to reap the benefit of it at the end of it, it should just be something that you account for. It's part of your protocol moving forward. Now, so we talked about drugs. You talked about the off-season drugs, a little bit what you're doing in prep. The only thing we didn't really ask about, and maybe you don't even need it, but what are you doing for cardio?
Not much, man. I got up to like 27 minutes and then Blue cut it back down to 20 because I was losing weight too
Okay.
quick. And then he just bumped it back up to 30 like a week ago. But
What are you doing?
I'm like
Stairs? You doing the treadmill?
just fasted stairs. Yeah.
Right on.
In the past, I've just gone for walks around my neighborhood,
Yeah.
and that works relatively well too. You just got to go for a little longer.
Yeah.
But I got a gym right next to me, so I figured why not.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I don't have to do a ton of cardio to get in shape. I don't do any cardio in the off season, which
I
I
was
know
going to
is
ask,
not
that was going to be my next
wise.
one.
Yeah, but I mean, I know that's not the best for you, but on the other hand, you're very responsive to it when you add in just like 10 minutes of stairs at the beginning of prep.
Right.
And I think, just talking about growth hormone, I think that if fasted cardio, when you are doing like stairs, you're on a bit of clen, you have growth hormone in the morning, maybe some,
Maybe
him, all of those.
T3. Yeah.
Yeah, and like your blood sugar is low. I personally notice think like that burns fat way quicker. Maybe I'm just imagining it, but it makes sense. Your blood sugar is low, you're releasing all these fatty acids with the drugs that you're using, and then you go burn it off immediately on the stairs. And then you go add your carbs in later in the day when you get close to your training session. But I mean, because of that, I think I'm able to do not a whole lot. Um, when I've done like post workout cardio in the past, I I started doing some stairs in 21, like 10 minutes of stairs
And you got
after I
hypo,
trained.
passed out.
Well, I actually like my legs started just like sucking up. They just started disappearing in a couple days. It was like, stop it. So I just stopped. Um, I I can't overdo it on that. So
Interesting.
I'm my body's kind of fragile. Honestly, like I can't diet too hard or wither away. I can't do much cardio or I'll wither away. Which kind of makes me feel like a pussy when I'm deep in prep and I'm doing half an hour of cardio compared to
But
some guys.
also it's
But
because you have a ton of muscle and you train like
yeah,
an
that
animal.
helps. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I was
that
just saying
definitely
that
helps. Yeah.
the training stimulus alone with the loads you're moving and the things you can do in the gym is cardio. I mean, in a nutshell, because to me that's burning more fat than the 30 minutes on the stairs. It's the people, not black and white, but I think people that train like pussies are the ones that have to end up doing more cardio because they just
Right.
don't ever push it past the limit with their training.
Yeah.
And then you wind up looking more like an endurance athlete for a lot of people because you've done the law of specificity. You've done more of that than you have weight training.
Yeah. You got to think of it like a training stimulus. Like
Right.
if you can maximize the amount of weights that you're lifting and minimize the amount of cardio that you're doing, it's going to affect your look at the end of the day. And you do what you got to do to get in shape at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If that means an hour and a half of cardio, sorry, that's what that means. But
yeah.
I've
been, we've all been there, I'm sure. I mean, I know I've been there.
Yeah.
So
I
go ahead, Tommy,
I think it speaks to, how well you and Blue work together, the way, he has an understanding of your body of you can't push too hard for too long or you'll wither away. So, that's the experience of that a coach brings is it's their job to implement those refeeds, to recognize that look in their athlete and to make the call to refeed. So, I watched it all last prep for you. And then I've seen you mention it in Instagram and on this podcast today, like you push really hard for like 4, 5, 6 days and then you refuel. And then the next time after pushing for 4 or 5, 6 more days, you've hit a new low and you just keep rinse, wash, and repeating that cycle through the whole prep. And to me, it makes perfect sense for a guy that trains really hard, who has a fast metabolism. That's like the perfect plan. You just keep doing the same thing every week, really.
Yeah, I put all my weights in the morning when I get out of bed. I put it in a graph, and it kind of looks like a zigzag down. Up, refeed, come down the hill, refeed, come down the hill. Just like you said, rinse and repeat. And that formula works really good for me. I think I make the most progress as far as fat loss when I'm closer to the bottom of that hill, when I'm flatter, when I'm feeling shittier, like 3, 4, 5 days after I went 8 last. Because when your blood sugar is low, when you're depleted, all that you have to burn for calories is fat, right? So you're going to make the most progress. But just can't string it out for too long, otherwise you'll overdo it. So I mean, basically just have to, for me, for the rest of the prep, I just have to balance that for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I should be able to land the plane.
Yeah.
When those times that you are waking up flat and he needs to refeed you, what does that look like? Is it a full day of basically an off-season diet of bodybuilding food, or is he sending you out to eat? What does it look like?
Blue is famous for his sushi refeeds.
Okay.
So he'll send me to go. I mean, we got all these all you can eat sushi places here in Arizona. So I just go to one of those. It gives me a limit on how much I can have, so I don't actually eat everything. But
What's that? How
yeah,
does he give you a number of pieces or what?
yeah, it's like 35, 40 usually.
Okay. All right.
And I behave like most of the time and actually do like 35, 40, like he tells me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I put like, 3, 4 pounds back on and then
Yep.
bring it off again.
Pull it all
And
down. Yeah.
yeah. And I think we've also, like my weak body parts are like my back primarily. So I train my like pull down back width day on Saturday. So I've done my refeeds Friday night, and I end up having pretty good workouts the next day.
Yeah.
Versus like if I'd waited until Saturday, I would have had a garbage workout on Saturday night,
Right.
and then yeah, dig myself out of the hole after that. But like if you string together a bunch of shitty training sessions on a weak body part, it's gonna
Right.
show.
Yep.
So we kind of keep that in mind when we're prioritizing, like, hey, when do we need to go eat?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really smart, because like you said, not only will it show on a weak body part, it's going to show and make a bigger difference than other body parts, because it's already your weak link. And that's really where you see guys get exposed in bodybuilding up on stage, is how bad are your weaknesses, or how glaring are your weaknesses. So yeah, that makes
Yeah.
total sense. It's been interesting to hear how you guys have done it, especially because at this point you guys are like a finely tuned machine. And I think that's one thing in this era that's, I don't want to just badmouth the current times like, like an old head, but I don't think it's any surprise that people jump around more and have a shorter attention span, a shorter stretch of patience for things. So you don't see people just giving a coach a good chunk of time and letting them do their thing. Like you guys, this prep, it sounds like from what I'm hearing, are just now starting to kind of reap the rewards of working together for 2+ years at this point. So,
Yeah, I mean, because last year's prep
yeah,
went
go
so
ahead.
smooth, just
Yeah,
kind of using the same playbook. Don't
yeah,
fix it if it ain't broken again. And
yeah,
like, I don't know if again, Blue is like the only like really serious coach I've worked with. I don't know what other coaches are like, but at this point in prep, I'm checking in like every day or every other day.
yeah,
I'm sending my weight every morning because when you're bigger, your weight can move quicker. You can fluctuate pound, 2 pounds in a day. Um, so and you got to really watch things close when you get close to the end like this. So again, I'm getting on the phone with him quite frequently, to just talk over little stuff, big stuff, or if he just wants to shoot the shit with me, sometimes he'll call me.
yeah,
Yeah, he's, I don't know if you guys have listened to Blue at all, but he's a character. I love him.
yeah,
Not everyone's cup of tea, but I love him. So.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Obviously, it works.
yeah, we can rock through some of these questions, and that should round us out for. I think we're getting close, but
Yeah,
we're gonna. This is funny, Stu, because you and I share the same views on this one. Ask him about his hatred for people who love the brand Dark Sport.
Well, put it like this: when you talk about being unique and standing out from the crowd, and you all look exactly the fucking same, there's something wrong there, And it's like, here's what I think. Most of my clothes are from Goodwill, or they're hand-me-downs from fat powerlifters I used to know, because they have big shirts and you grow into them, right? I'd rather spend my money on, another kid of growth hormone
I
or
was
a
just gonna
steak,
say,
or like, put it in a piggy bank
yeah,
than drop it in on a $50 t-shirt that was made by some Cambodian slave, with some catchy logo on it. I'm just not a huge fan of the whole consumerism thing. And
Yeah.
I
wow, it
find
sounds like we may need to do a
influencers.
whole nother episode on conspiracy theories, but that'll be for the other channel.
Yeah.
That'll be for the
Not for-
channel that's on Rumble.
I don't know. I sound like a real dick, but I think
No, you sound like us on this show, so it fits right in.
You just, I don't know, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You know, I'm lucky that like when I was growing up, I'm just a little bit older than a lot of these kids who were wearing like dark sport or young LA or whatever the fuck, right? And it's just clothes, so it's not that offensive to me. But like think about like who these kids are looking up to. They're looking up to like fitness influencers and slick looking young beautiful people on Instagram. I looked up to bodybuilders who were
Yeah.
wearing like cutoffs and baggy shit and
Wild
they're
fucking
grunting and
Zuba
sweat.
sweatpants and shit. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Jean
yeah.
shorts.
Yeah, crazy shit like that. And I think a lot of, I'm sure you guys are the same way. A lot of the people that we looked up to coming up in the sport are, they're just monsters, not pretty boys.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's not even their fault really. It's just what they're fed on social
Yeah.
media, and it's a sign of the times. If you're on TikTok, you're going to be into that stuff. But yeah, not my cup of tea.
Here's one. What have been your mental thoughts through your career? Did you always believe you could be a pro?
Um,
Hmm.
I think when I did my first show, I knew I caught the bug, just like a lot of people do. I wanted to compete again really soon. I did take some time, fortunately, but I knew that when I competed for the first time, I was in Classic. This was like 2017, one of the first years. And I was like pretty close to the weight cap, taking all I was taking at the time was like some SARMs. So I don't even know if that did shit. So I knew when I started taking drugs, like I was gonna blow right past that weight cap and I wasn't gonna be able to be a classic guy. Um, but at 5'8", I know I'm gonna have to be big, like in order to be competitive in either the amateurs or the pros. Um, and I was just like, okay, what are the professionals at my height? They're like 240, 250-ish on stage. I need to get there. And if I get there and I don't look like a pro, well, then this shit ain't for me. But I enjoyed the process and I enjoy training and I enjoy like, getting stronger and stuff. So there wasn't ever really any question like, was I gonna keep on pushing as far as I could? But you don't really know until you try, right? Um, Fortunately, it worked out for me. I mean, I'm probably never going to make a living off this stuff, but yeah.
And then we can do one more, but so this is from a dude who just actually competed Saturday, and he wants to know basically post show, do you go all in on clean food to reach an all-time high weight, or do you take it slowly and build up? What are your thoughts?
Personally, I kind of eat like an asshole for like a week or two after the show. Like I try to like I'll binge on like a lot of clean food and then I'll just eat a ton of junk on top. I'll be up at 2 a.m. eating a pint of ice cream from my freezer. I can get away with that. Keep in mind that like if you get in really good shape for a show, it's pretty hard to get fat afterwards. Assuming you have a lot of muscle and you're still training hard pretty soon after the show, you're going to be using those calories. If you got in good shape. If you weren't in great shape and you had to kill yourself and eat nothing at the end to try and get in that mediocre condition, if you start binging afterwards and you have a kind of meh metabolism, you're going to get really fat really quick. So your mileage may vary, I guess. I probably get up to the weight that I started prep at maybe a month and a half after the show, 6 to 8 weeks or so. And keep in mind, like in that time frame, I go from like a full on prep cycle down to like, 800 milligrams of gear. So like much less, but I still have some drugs in there to like help me grow in that time frame because it is a great time to put on tissue during a rebound. But yeah, in pretty short order, I get back up to the weight that I was at the beginning of prep, but leaner this time because I kind of put on some tissue in that time frame. I had a couple of really good rebounds in 21 and after the USA's in 22. which I think accounted for a lot of the tissue that I put on in the last, maybe not the majority, but quite a bit of the tissue that I put on in the last couple of years. So
I think whatever you do, you should you should want to keep hunger in play. If hunger starts to cease, you're fucked, because I mean, we talked about Stu's off season on earlier. Like, every meal is force feeding at some point. Like, you don't want to get to that point sooner than you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind with how you approach, rebounds and post-show eating and all of it all together. I like the approach of, you should be at your prep starting weight, a month and a half, 2 months post-show. That seems to be a pretty good, step-by-step process where you're still having some things off plan, you're eating clean food, you're training hard, you're just having fun bodybuilding, really.
Yeah.
But you're still setting yourself up to, make progress into your off season.
And like we said at the beginning of this, like nobody ever got fat eating chicken and rice. So if you're eating a ton of clean food and you're training hard and stuff, you're going to be a lot better off than if you're having like a cheat meal every single day and you're snacking all day. Most people cannot get away with that. I can kind of get away with that. I don't know if I'll always be able to get away with that, but if you're eating all your meals and then you have some extra shit at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. So.
Right on.
Yeah, I'll just say I've done what you've done for 2 weeks post show and absolutely been fat. So for anybody listening, mind yourself.
Yeah. Your mileage may vary.
But all right, man, I think we've taken up plenty of your time at this point. Less than 4 weeks out from the New York Pro. Absolute pleasure, man. Awesome conversation. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to come on, especially with where you're at in prep. You had mentioned before, like, you don't think you'll ever make any money bodybuilding or doing this. Are you coaching?
I've started coaching a couple of people. Yeah.
Okay.
Blue actually encouraged me to start doing that because, he was like, listen, dude, if you get like 10 people, they could pay for all your bodybuilding expenses, all your flights to shows and whatever.
Yeah.
And that's, if I can do that and keep my job in the meantime, that would be great. I mean, I know that you both of you guys coach full time. It's something I've played around with in my head, but I'm very financially conservative and I'm very safe with my decisions in life, I guess. So it's really nice to have a salary. And being a desk jockey ain't so bad. If I was, working construction or something, I couldn't be a bodybuilder. That would be a different story. But it's something I've thought about. When you do the math on it, you can make a pretty damn good living coaching people. And it kind of scales with how much time and effort you put into it and how good you get at it. And on top of it, like, I love bodybuilding, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, that and man, like, you can help people just from one conversation with you. You will be able to help people, and you will be able to.
The couple of people I started coaching, just like they're so grateful to for the help that I'm giving them. I'm like, I'm not giving you any rocket science here. It's not that complicated, but it's fun to see people make progress and be happy with them achieving their goals and stuff. I enjoy it a lot. So
yeah, it's fulfilling, man, like you said.
Yeah,
it's definitely fulfilling, and like you said, man, you love bodybuilding. So yeah, like, you're absolutely spending more time. There's a lot of emotional effort that goes into it, but also it's not like it's just your pencil pusher. You know what I mean? Like, it is something that you care about, and if you find a good group of people that you care about their success, and it becomes really fulfilling. So yeah, I just brought it up. Wanted a chance for you to bring it up if anybody's listening and heard this and they wanted to hire you or ask about coaching. We wish you all the success, man. And if I run into you in New York, I'd love to be able to speak with you, get your thoughts on the show or whatever's going on. But otherwise, for Mr. USA, Tommy Styles, I'm Joseph PIRCHER. This was a Thinking Man's podcast. And until next time, guys, we are out.